3 weeks ago, I walked into our usual Monday morning meeting only to find my ex-girlfriend. Jessica seated at the head of the table, dressed in a sharp power suit and wearing that all-too-familiar smug smile she used to flash when she thought she'd won. The HR director cleared her throat and announced, "Please welcome Jessica Carter, our new creative director." I froze mid-sip, my coffee turning cold as every head in the room turned toward me. Here's what they didn't know. Jessica didn't just break my heart 8 months ago, she steamrolled it. While I was piecing myself back together, she was clearly climbing rungs at lightning speed. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you. Make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Because here's the kicker. I'm now dating her best friend, Emma. Yeah, Jessica's college ride. Dada. And now, she watches us flirt, laugh, and walk out for lunch together every single day. The same woman who once said I'd never thrive, without her now has to sign off on my PTO while I take her ex-bestie on weekend getaways. Poetic, right? It all started the day that should have been the high point of my career. I just secured the Morrison Tech account our agency's biggest client win in 2 years. The commission alone could cover half a year's rent, and for the first time in a long time, I felt unstoppable. I walked into Grind Coffee, the spot Jessica and I used to frequent during our 3-year relationship. Maya, the barista, who'd overheard enough of our spats to moonlight as our therapist, smiled knowingly. "Ryan, you look like you just hit the jackpot," she said, sliding my Americano over. "Close," I grinned. "Just landed the biggest deal of my life." That's when my phone buzzed. It was Emma. What started as occasional check-ins between two people burned by the same flame had recently evolved into something more. "Heard about Morrison Tech. Want to celebrate over dinner tonight?" Followed by a champagne emoji. Stared at her text longer than I should have. Emma was everything Jessica wasn't: warm, encouraging, real. She made me feel like I was enough, not like a project in need of fixing. "Absolutely," I replied. "Fair warning, I might be intolerably proud of myself tonight." "Good, someone should be," she answered. 7 at Canard. Toward the office, it hit me how far I'd come in 8 months. Back then, I lived for Jessica's approval, questioned my worth, bent myself into shapes she might find impressive. We were apartment hunting, about to move in together. I'd been saving like crazy. Then, the night before we were supposed to sign the lease, she delivered a speech I'll never forget. "Ryan, I love you, but I need someone with drive. Someone who matches my ambition. You're too comfortable. I can't build a future with someone who doesn't want to grow." It felt less like a breakup and more like a quarterly performance review. Worse than the words was the way she made it sound like mercy. "You'll understand someday," she said, brushing my hand like a manager offering severance. "This is for the best." I moved out that weekend, partly because I couldn't afford the place alone, mostly because I couldn't stand the ghosts of what we almost had. I relocated to a tiny studio in Hawthorne, threw myself into work, and vowed to prove her wrong. So the irony wasn't lost on me when, right at the peak of my career, she came crashing back into my life. That afternoon, I was polishing the final Morrison Tech proposal when Janet from admin tapped on my cubicle. "Ryan, conference room B, all hands meeting." I grabbed my notebook and joined the crowd. David Kim, my mentor, and the guy who backed me on Morrison, gave me a proud nod, but the room felt off. Nervous energy, tense smiles. Janet fidgeted with her notes like something heavy was about to drop. "Thanks for coming, everyone," she began with a forced brightness. "I'm thrilled to announce our new creative director, Jessica Carter." The room fell silent, and then she walked in. Hair cut shorter, sharp as ever, that same confident stride. The same heels I used to hear echoing across my apartment floors on Sunday mornings. "Thank you, Janet," she said smoothly. "I'm excited to join this amazing team." She scanned the room. When her eyes met mine, something flickered: smugness, surprise, satisfaction. It was gone in an instant, replaced by a professional mask. But I saw it. "I believe in excellence," she continued, "and I plan to challenge us to push beyond limits." The rest of the meeting blurred. I watched her in stunned silence, watching the person who once told me I was average, now taking a seat of power, just a few feet away. As everyone filed out, she called out casually, "Ryan, can you stay for a minute?" It was just the two of us now, surrounded by echoes of a shared past. She took her time gathering her things, a slow, deliberate move to assert control. "So," she finally said, looking up, "this is unexpected." "For you, maybe," I said evenly. "I've been here for 2 years." "Of course," she replied, studying me like a case study. "I heard about Morrison. Congrats." Her tone drained the wind of its triumph. "Thanks," I replied. "I'll need to go over your current projects," she added. "We need to ensure alignment with my vision." There it was, classic Jessica, dressed in diplomacy, but sharp as ever. "Of course," I said, rising to leave. "I'll have everything ready." Just as I reached the door, she called my name one more time. "Oh, and Ryan, I heard you've been spending time with Emma. I hope you know what you're doing." I turned back to face her, and for the first time since she'd walked into that conference room, I saw something genuine in her expression. It might have been concern, or possessiveness, or just curiosity. But whatever it was, it confirmed what I'd suspected Jessica knew about Emma and me, when she wasn't as indifferent as she pretended to be. "I know exactly what I'm doing," I said, and walked out before she could respond. That evening, as I sat across from Emma at Kennard, watching her laugh at something the waiter had said, I realized that my perfect day had just become infinitely more complicated. Emma looked radiant in the dim lighting, her dark hair falling in waves around her shoulders, her brown eyes sparkling with genuine warmth. She was everything Jessica had never been: present, engaged, interested in my thoughts and feelings rather than just my potential utility. "So tell me everything about this Morrison deal," she said, leaning forward with genuine interest. "I want to hear how you completely dominated that presentation." As I began to recount the details of my victory, I couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle was just beginning. Jessica was back in my life, armed with authority and the kind of strategic mind that had once made me feel like I was always playing chess while she was already 3 moves ahead. But this time, I wasn't the same person who had begged her to reconsider 8 months ago. I had Emma now, and a career that was finally gaining momentum, and most importantly, I had learned what it felt like to be valued for who I was rather than who I might become. The war for my future was about to begin, and for the first time in my life, I was ready to fight back. The next morning arrived with the kind of Portland drizzle that made everything look gray and uninspiring. I'd barely slept, my mind racing through scenarios of how Jessica might use her new position to make my life difficult. As I walked into the office, clutching my coffee like a lifeline, I noticed the subtle changes she'd already begun implementing. The reception area had been rearranged, with new motivational posters about excellence and pushing boundaries strategically placed where everyone would see them. Jessica's office, the corner space that used to belong to our previous creative director, now had floor-to-ceiling windows that gave her a perfect view of the entire creative department, including my desk. "Morning, Ryan," called out Marcus, one of my cubicle neighbors, but his usual jovial tone seemed forced. "Heard you got the Morrison account. That's huge, man." "Thanks," I replied, settling into my chair and immediately feeling the weight of observation. Sure enough, when I glanced up, Jessica was standing at her window, coffee mug in hand, watching the morning routine unfold below her. Our eyes met for a split second before she turned away, but the message was clear. She was watching, always watching. The first week under Jessica's leadership was a masterclass in psychological warfare disguised as professional management. She scheduled individual meetings with every team member, supposedly to assess current projects and identify growth opportunities. When my appointment came up on Thursday afternoon, I found myself sitting across from her in the same conference room where she'd announced her arrival. "Ryan, I've been reviewing your portfolio," she began, flipping through a folder that contained printouts of every campaign I'd worked on over the past 2 years. "Your work is competent." The pause before competent was surgical in its precision. She knew exactly how to deliver praise that felt like criticism, a skill she'd perfected during our relationship. "The Morrison account is impressive," she continued, "but I'm concerned about your long-term strategic thinking. For For instance, this campaign for Valley Fitness last month. It's safe, predictable. Where's the innovation? Where's the risk-taking that separates good marketers from great ones? I sat there, watching her dissect my work with the same clinical detachment she'd once used to analyze our relationship. Every critique was technically valid, but delivered with just enough condescension to make me doubt myself. I'd like to see more creative ambition from you, she said, closing the folder. Perhaps we could schedule weekly check-ins to ensure you're meeting your potential. Weekly check-ins? With my ex-girlfriend, who is now my boss, who is dating my current girlfriend's former best friend. The absurdity of it all would have been laughable if it weren't so professionally threatening. That sounds great, I managed, hating how easily I slipped back into the appeasing tone I'd used with her for 3 years. Excellent. Oh, and Ryan. She leaned back in her chair, studying me with those green eyes that had once made me feel like the center of the universe. I noticed you've been leaving promptly at 5 lately. Hope you're not losing that drive. We used to talk about... There it was, the subtle implication that my work ethic was lacking, delivered with just enough plausible deniability that I couldn't call her out on it without sounding paranoid. That evening, I met Emma at her apartment. In Selwood, a cozy space, filled with her artwork and photography. She was working on a freelance project, her laptop surrounded by color swatches and design mock-ups. Her hair pulled back in a messy bun that somehow made her look even more beautiful. You look stressed, she said, glancing up from her screen. Rough day at the office? I slumped onto her couch, suddenly exhausted by the effort of navigating Jessica's psychological minefield. She's playing games, Emma. Professional games, but games nonetheless. Emma saved her work and closed the laptop, giving me her full attention. This was something Jessica had never done. She'd always multitasked during our conversations, checking her phone or mentally planning her next move while I talked. Tell me what happened, Emma said, curling up beside me on the couch. I recounted the meeting, the weekly check-ins, the subtle undermining disguised as constructive feedback. As I spoke, I watched Emma's expression shift from concern to something harder, more protective. That's what she does, Emma said quietly. She finds your insecurities and pokes at them until you start questioning yourself. She did it to me in college, and she did it to you when you were together. What do you mean she did it to you? Emma was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing patterns on the couch cushion. Freshman year, I was dating this guy named Alex, really sweet, studying pre-med. Jessica didn't like him, said he wasn't ambitious enough for me. She kept making little comments about how he was holding me back, how I could do better. Eventually, I started believing her and broke up. With him, that's horrible. The worst part was that she was right there to comfort me afterward, acting like she'd been trying to protect me all along. It took me years to realize that she'd sabotaged my relationship because she couldn't stand seeing me happy with someone. She hadn't chosen for me. I felt a chill run down my spine. Is that what she's doing now? Trying to break us up? I don't know, Emma said. But her voice carried a certainty that suggested she did know. But I'm not going to let her. And neither are you. The next few weeks fell into a pattern that felt increasingly suffocating. Jessica would find subtle ways to assert her authority, assigning my projects to other team members, scheduling important meetings during my lunch breaks, ceasing herself on emails that had nothing to do with her department. Each move was professionally justifiable but personally devastating. The worst part was how she managed to make me complicit in my own undermining. During our weekly check-ins, she'd ask probing questions about my relationship with Emma, disguised as friendly concern. Emma doing? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story, she'd ask, sorting through papers with practiced casualness. I worry about her sometimes. She's always been so sensitive, so quick to get attached. She's doing great, I'd reply, trying to keep my voice neutral. That's wonderful. I just hope she's not rushing into anything. She has a history of tense relationships that don't work out well. These conversations left me feeling dirty, like I was betraying Emma by participating in Jessica's fishing expeditions. but refusing to engage would have been even more suspicious, so I played along, hating myself for it. Meanwhile, my relationship with Emma was deepening in ways that both thrilled and terrified me. She had this way of seeing through Jessica's manipulations that made me feel less crazy, less alone. When I'd come home frustrated by another day of psychological warfare, she'd listen without judgment and then redirect my energy towards something positive. "You know what I love about you?" she said one evening as we walked through Laurelhurst Park. "You're genuine. You don't play games or try to manipulate people. You just are." Jessica would say that's a weakness. Jessica would say a lot of things doesn't make them true. We'd stopped walking, and Emma turned to face me fully. The late afternoon sun was filtering through the trees, casting golden highlights in her dark hair. "Ryan, I need you to know something. Whatever Jessica is trying to do, whatever game she's playing, it's not going to work. I'm not going anywhere." When she kissed me then, soft and certain, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. The sensation of being chosen, not tolerated. Of being wanted for who I was, not who I might become. But even as I held her, I couldn't shake the feeling that Jessica was just getting started. The weekly check-ins were becoming more frequent, and I'd caught her watching Emma and me during the few times Emma had visited the office. There was something calculating in her gaze, like she was gathering intelligence for a campaign I couldn't yet see. The breaking point came during our quarterly review meeting. Jessica had scheduled it for a Friday afternoon, right when I was supposed to leave for a weekend trip to the coast with Emma. I'd booked a cabin in Cannon Beach weeks ago, and Emma had been looking forward to it all month. "I'm sorry, Ryan, but this couldn't wait," Jessica said as I sat across from her, my weekend bag still hanging from my shoulder. "I've been reviewing your recent performance, and I have some concerns." She spread out a series of reports and printouts, each one meticulously annotated with her handwriting. "Your Morrison account is performing well, but I'm worried about your overall productivity. You've been leaving early, taking longer lunch breaks, and I've noticed your engagement in team meetings has decreased." I stared at the papers, recognizing the trap she'd laid. Every early departure had been pre-approved. Every long lunch had been to meet with clients. Every quiet moment in meetings had been because she'd been dominating the conversation. "I'm not sure I understand," I said carefully. "I think you do." She leaned forward, her voice taking on the intimate tone she used to use when we were alone. "I think you're distracted. I think you've lost focus on what's important. And what's important? Your career, Ryan, your future, the potential I've always seen in you." The words hit me like a physical blow. It was the same language she'd used during our relationship, the same promise that I could be better, could be more. If only I worked harder, tried harder, wanted it more. "I see what you're doing," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm doing my job. I'm trying to help you succeed. No, you're trying to control me, just like you always did." For the first time since she'd walked back into my life, Jessica's professional mask slipped. I saw a flash of the woman who had once screamed at me in her apartment, who had made me feel like I was never enough, who had convinced me that losing her was the worst thing that could happen to me. "I think we should continue this conversation on Monday," she said, her voice ice cold. "When you've had time to think about your priorities." I stood up, my hands shaking with anger and adrenaline. "My priorities are crystal clear, Jessica, and they don't include letting you manipulate me anymore." As I walked out of her office, I felt the weight of 20 pairs of eyes on me. Entire creative department had heard at least part of our conversation, and the silence that followed my exit was deafening. I drove straight to Emma's apartment, my mind racing with the implications of what had just happened. I'd essentially told my boss off, challenged her authority in front of the entire team. Any normal person would have been terrified of the professional consequences. But as I knocked on Emma's door, I realized that for the first time in months, I felt free. I'd finally seen Jessica's game for what it was, and I'd refused to play along. Emma opened the door, took one look at my face, and pulled me inside without a word. As I told her what had happened, I watched her expression shift from concern to anger to something fierce and protective. "She's not going to win," Emma said when I finished. "Whatever she's planning, whatever she thinks she's accomplishing, she's not going to win. What if she fires me? Then you'll find something better. But she's not going to fire you, Ryan. She's having too much fun torturing you. As we packed for our weekend trip, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just declared war on someone who had spent 3 years learning all my weaknesses. But for the first time since Jessica had walked back into my life, I felt like I had something worth fighting for. The drive to the coast was quiet, both of us lost in our thoughts. But as we watched the sunset from our cabin deck, Emma's hand in mine, I realized that Jessica had made one crucial miscalculation. She'd assumed that I was still the same person who had begged her not to leave 8 months ago. She was about to learn how wrong she was. Monday morning arrived with an email that changed everything. I opened my laptop at Grind Coffee, my usual pre-work ritual. And there it was in my inbox. Performance Improvement Plan. Immediate action required from Jessica Carter, TCD to HR and David Kim. My hands trembled slightly as I opened the attachment. 12 pages of meticulously documented performance deficiencies stared back at me. Each one carefully crafted to paint a picture of an employee who was failing to meet expectations. Late arrivals that were actually approved, flexible scheduling. Client complaints that I'd never heard about. Missed deadlines for projects that had been completed on time. It was a masterpiece of corporate manipulation, and I knew exactly what it meant. Jessica wasn't just playing games anymore. She was systematically building a case to fire me. Called Emma immediately, my voice shaking as I explained what I was looking at. She's trying to destroy my career, I said, scrolling through page after page of fabricated concerns. This is all lies, but it's so well documented that HR will have to take it seriously. Can you fight it? Emma asked, and I could hear the worry in her voice. How? It's my word against hers, and she's the creative director. She has all the power here. The walk to the office felt like a death march. Every step brought me closer to a confrontation that could end my career, and I had no idea how to defend myself against an opponent who controlled the narrative. David Kim was waiting by my desk when I arrived, his expression grim. Ryan, we need to talk. My office now. David's office was a sanctuary of calm in the chaos of the marketing world. Filled with plants and natural light that made even difficult conversations feel manageable. But today, the usual warmth was absent from his demeanor. I got the pip this morning, he said without preamble. Want to tell me what's really going on here? I looked at this man who had mentored me for 2 years, who had believed in me when no one else did, and made a decision that would change everything. I told him the truth. All of it. About my relationship with Jessica. About her manipulation tactics. About how she was using her position to settle personal scores. David listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with each revelation. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment, staring out his window at the Portland skyline. I had my suspicions, he said finally. Jessica's been asking a lot of questions about you, your work history, your personal life, questions that didn't seem relevant to managing your performance. So you believe me? Right. I've worked with you for 2 years. I know your work ethic, your capabilities, your potential. This pip doesn't match the employee I know. He turned back to face me, and I saw something steel-like in his expression. But believing you and proving it are 2 different things. That afternoon, I received a calendar invitation for a formal performance review meeting scheduled for the following Friday. The meeting that would likely end my employment at StreamlineDigital. Jessica had set her trap perfectly, and I was walking straight into it. But David Kim had been in corporate America longer than I'd been alive. He understood how to fight battles I couldn't even see coming. Over the next few days, he began his own quiet investigation. Reaching out to clients I'd worked with, reviewing email threads, and documenting the real timeline of my projects. Meanwhile, Jessica's behavior became increasingly erratic. She started showing up at my desk unannounced, hovering while I worked, making comments loud enough for the entire department to hear. Ryan, I noticed you were on a personal call earlier. I hope you understand that company time should be used for company business, she said one afternoon, her voice carrying across the cubicle farm. The personal call had been Emma, checking to see if I wanted to meet for lunch. A 2-minute conversation that Jessica had somehow stretched into evidence of unprofessional behavior Of course, I replied, refusing to take the bait, but I could see my coworkers exchanging glances, and I knew that Jessica was succeeding in her campaign to isolate me. The breaking point came on Wednesday evening. I was working late, trying to finish a proposal for a new client, when I heard Jessica's voice coming from the conference room. She was on a phone call, and her office door was open just enough for her voice to carry. Emma's always been naive about men, I heard her say. She falls for the wrong type every time. Remember that disaster with Alex in college? This is just history repeating itself. I froze at my desk, my blood turning to ice. She was talking about Emma, about us, to someone who was clearly encouraging the conversation. Oh, he'll hurt her eventually, Jessica continued. Men like Ryan are takers. If they charm you, use you for what they need, then move on to the next opportunity. I just hate watching Emma set herself up for disappointment again. The casual cruelty in her voice was breathtaking. Oh, she was poisoning our relationship with calculated precision, using Emma's past insecurities against her. And whoever she was talking to was eating it up. I pulled out my phone and started recording, capturing her words as evidence of the personal vendetta that was driving her professional decisions. It wasn't much, but it was something. Thursday morning brought an unexpected ally. Marcus, my cubicle neighbor, approached me during my coffee break with a nervous expression. Hey Ryan, can we talk somewhere private? We walked to the parking garage, away from the office surveillance, in Jessica's watchful eyes. Marcus looked around nervously before speaking. I know what Jessica's doing to you, he said quietly, and I have proof. He pulled out his phone and showed me a series of screenshots, email threads between Jessica and Mark Thompson, her business partner from her previous agency. The messages were damning, detailed discussions about how to neutralize me as a threat, strategies for documentation that would support termination, and most shocking of all, a plan to poach my clients once I was gone. She's been planning this since day one, Marcus said. She didn't take this job to advance her career. She took it to destroy yours. Why are you showing me this? Marcus looked uncomfortable. Because she asked me to spy on you. To report back on your activities, your conversations, your relationships. When I refused, she implied that my job might be in jeopardy too. Scope of Jessica's scheme was becoming clear. She hadn't just wanted to hurt me, she'd wanted to dismantle my entire professional life, piece by piece, while positioning herself to benefit from the wreckage. That evening, I sat in Emma's apartment, surrounded by printouts and screenshots that documented Jessica's campaign against me. Emma studied each piece of evidence with the focused intensity she usually reserved for her design work. It's insane, she said finally. She's risking her own career just to hurt you. It's not just about hurting me anymore, I realized. She's trying to destroy our relationship too. That phone call I heard yesterday, she's actively working to turn people against us. Emma was quiet for a long moment, her fingers drumming against the coffee table. Ryan, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have mentioned earlier. My stomach dropped. What? Jessica's been texting me since the day after she started at your company. And nothing dramatic, just casual check-ins asking how I'm doing, if I'm happy. What kind of texts? Emma pulled out her phone and showed me the message thread. On the surface, they looked like innocent friend communications. But reading between the lines, I could see Jessica's manipulation at work. Subtle questions about our relationship, gentle probes about my behavior, carefully planted seeds of doubt, disguised as concern. She's been gathering intelligence, I said, scrolling through months of messages. Every insecurity you've ever shared with her, every doubt you've ever had, she's been cataloging it all. I know, I've been documenting it, waiting for her to reveal her real agenda. Emma took my hands, her brown, eyes serious and determined, because I wanted you to see it for yourself. I wanted you to understand what kind of person she really is, without me having to convince you. That night, I barely slept. Jessica's web of manipulation was more extensive than I'd imagined, reaching into every aspect of my professional and personal life. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like I had allies, people who saw through her facade and were willing to fight back. The next morning, I walked into David Kim's office with everything we'd uncovered. Marcus had agreed to provide his evidence. Emma had documented Jessica's psychological manipulation campaign, and I had recordings of her unprofessional behavior. David reviewed everything methodically, his expression growing grimmer with each revelation. "This is harassment," he said finally. "This is workplace bullying disguised as performance management. And this," he held up the screenshots of Jessica's emails with Mark Thompson, "this is conspiracy to commit corporate sabotage. What do? We take this to HR and legal today, before your performance review meeting." The HR conference room felt different when we walked in together. David had requested an emergency meeting with the department head, citing serious workplace misconduct that requires immediate attention. Jessica wasn't invited. Linda Morrison, the HR director, listened to our presentation with growing alarm. The evidence was overwhelming. Documented harassment, conflict of interest, abuse of authority, and conspiracy to damage company assets. By the time we finished, Jessica's carefully constructed narrative had crumbled completely. "Where's Jessica now?" Linda asked. "In her office, preparing for Ryan's termination meeting tomorrow," David replied. Linda's jaw tightened. "Not anymore, she isn't." Within an hour, Jessica was escorted from the building by security, her personal effects packed into a cardboard box, her access to company systems revoked. The performance improvement plan that was supposed to end my career had instead exposed her own professional misconduct. As I watched her walk past my desk for the last time, she turned to look at me. The mask of professional competence had finally slipped, revealing the desperate, vindictive person underneath. For just a moment, I saw fear in her eyes, the realization that her carefully planned revenge had backfired spectacularly. "This isn't over," she mouthed silently. Her words meant only for me. But as I looked around the office, saw my coworkers returning to normal conversations, felt the weight of months of psychological warfare lifting from my shoulders, I realized that she was wrong. It was over. And for the first time in 8 months, I had one. The weeks following Jessica's departure felt like stepping into sunlight after months in a cave. The toxic atmosphere that had poisoned every interaction, every meeting, every casual conversation around the coffee machine simply evaporated. But the real transformation wasn't happening in the office. It was happening inside me. David Kim called me into his office the Monday after Jessica's termination, but this time his demeanor was completely different. Gone was the worried mentor, trying to navigate a delicate situation. In his place sat a senior executive who looked genuinely excited about something. "Ryan, I want to talk to you about your future here," he began, settling back in his chair. "The way you handled the situation with Jessica showed a level of integrity and strategic thinking that's rare in someone your age." I shifted uncomfortably. "I just documented what was happening." "No, you did much more than that. You built a case, gathered allies, and exposed a serious threat to this company. That's not the work of someone who's just competent. The work of someone with real leadership potential." He slid a folder across his desk. "I'm recommending you for promotion to senior marketing strategist. It comes with a 40% salary increase, your own team, and direct report responsibility for our top-tier clients." I stared at the offer letter, the numbers swimming before my eyes. 6 months ago, Jessica had convinced me that I was lucky to have any job at all. Now I was being offered a position that would put me on the fast track to management. "There's one more thing," David continued. "The Morrison account specifically requested that you remain as their primary contact. Apparently word got out about what happened with Jessica, and they were impressed by how you maintained professionalism under pressure." That afternoon, I called Emma from my desk openly. Without worrying about who might be listening or what Jessica might say about personal calls during work hours, the freedom of that simple act was intoxicating. "Senior marketing strategist," Emma repeated when I told her the news. "That's incredible, Ryan. I'm so proud of you." "It doesn't feel real yet," I admitted. For so long, Jessica had me convinced that I was mediocre, that I needed her approval to succeed. Now suddenly everyone's acting like I'm some kind of rising star. "Because you are," Emma said simply. "Jessica spent 3 years trying to dim your light so hers would shine brighter. Now that she's gone, people can see what was always there." That weekend, Emma and I drove up to Mount Hood for a hiking trip. As we climbed the trails, surrounded by towering evergreens and crystalline air, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: genuine confidence in my own abilities. I've been thinking about what Jessica said in that phone call. Emma mentioned as we sat on a rocky outcrop, looking out over the valley below. About me being naive about men, about having a pattern of choosing the wrong people. My stomach tightened. "Emma, let me finish," she said, turning to face me fully. She was right about one thing. I do have a pattern. I choose men who make me feel safe, who support my dreams instead of competing with them, who see me as a partner rather than a prize to be won. She reached for my hand, her fingers intertwining with mine. If that makes me naive, then I'm okay with being naive. The next few months transformed not just my career, but my entire sense of self. The promotion came with new responsibilities that challenged me in ways I'd never experienced. I was managing a team of 5 junior marketers, developing campaign strategies for Fortune 500 companies, and presenting 2 executive boards who hung on my every word. More importantly, I was learning to trust my own judgment again. Jessica had spent years making me second-guess every decision, question every instinct, seek approval for choices I was perfectly capable of making myself. Now, freed from her constant undermining, I discovered that I actually had excellent instincts about marketing, about people, about business strategy. My team responded to my leadership style with enthusiasm that surprised me. Instead of Jessica's intimidation tactics and psychological manipulation, I led through collaboration and encouragement. I discovered that people performed better when they felt supported rather than threatened, a concept that would have been revolutionary in Jessica's world. The transformation extended beyond the professional realm. Emma and I moved in together, finding a beautiful apartment in the Alberta Arts District that reflected both our personalities. Her photography and artwork covered the walls, while my growing collection of industry awards found space on the bookshelves. It was a home built on mutual respect and shared dreams, rather than power dynamics and conditional approval. One evening, as we were cooking dinner together in our new kitchen, Emma brought up something that had been weighing on her mind. "Ran into Sarah yesterday," she said, referring to one of her former mutual friends with Jessica. "She told me something interesting about what Jessica's been up to since leaving StreamlineDigital." I looked up from the vegetables I was chopping. Thought we agreed not to talk about her anymore. We did, but this affects us. "Sarah said Jessica has been telling people that you manipulated the situation at work, that you used your relationship with me to turn people against her." The knife stilled in my hand. Even months later, Jessica was still trying to rewrite history, still attempting to cast herself as the victim of circumstances beyond her control. "Does it bother you that she's spreading lies?" I asked. Emma considered. "This for a moment. It bothers me that she can't accept responsibility for her own actions. But it doesn't change anything for us. The people who matter know the truth." As winter settled over Portland, I received an unexpected call from a headhunter in Seattle. A major tech company was looking for a director of strategic marketing, and my name had come up in their search. The salary they were offering was double what I was making at StreamlineDigital. The position would give me the opportunity to build a marketing department from scratch. "It's an incredible opportunity," David said when I brought the offer to him. "Honestly, Ryan, you've outgrown what we can offer you here. I'd hate to lose you, but this is the kind of move that could define your career." The decision felt momentous in a way that went beyond just changing jobs. Seattle represented a complete fresh start, a chance to build something entirely my own without any shadows from my past with Jessica. But it also meant leaving the city where Emma had her freelance clients, her network, her life. That evening, I sat Emma down in our living room and laid out the opportunity. I watched her face as I explained the position, the salary, the potential for advancement, expecting to see disappointment or concern about leaving Portland. Instead, she broke into a huge grin. "Seattle has an incredible art scene," she said. "Some of the best galleries and design firms in the country. I've actually been thinking about expanding my client base beyond Portland anyway." "So you'd be willing to move, Ryan? I'd follow you anywhere. But more than that, I think this move could be amazing for both of us." 2 weeks later, I accepted the position. My last day at StreamlineDigital was bittersweet, filled with goodbye lunches and promises to stay in touch. David organized a farewell happy hour at a rooftop bar downtown, and as I looked around at the colleagues who had become friends, I felt profound gratitude for the journey that had brought me to this moment. 6 months ago, you were ready to quit marketing altogether, Marcus reminded me, as we stood on the bar's terrace, looking out over the Portland skyline. Now you're moving to Seattle to run a marketing department for a tech giant? That's gotta feel surreal. It does, I admitted. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Jessica had never come back into my life. You'd still be underestimating yourself, David interjected, joining our conversation. Jessica didn't create your potential, Ryan. She just obscured it. This promotion, this new opportunity, you earned all of this through your own talent and hard work. As the evening wound down and I said my final goodbyes, I realized that David was right. Jessica's greatest gift to me hadn't been the 3 years of love and support. It had been showing me exactly who I didn't want to be, and, by extension, helping me discover who I actually was. The drive to Seattle took 5 hours through some of the most beautiful landscape in the Pacific Northwest. Emma and I took turns behind the wheel, stopping at scenic overlooks and small towns along the way. Our belongings filled a U-Haul trailer that felt symbolic of our shared future. Everything we owned. Everything we'd built together, moving towards something bigger and better. As we crested the hill and saw Seattle's skyline spread out before us, Emma reached over and took my hand. "Ready for the next adventure?" she asked. I squeezed her fingers, thinking about the scared, insecure man I'd been just 8 months earlier, and the confident leader I was becoming. More than ready. What I didn't know then was that Jessica had one final card to play, and that Seattle would bring challenges I never could have anticipated. But I also didn't know that I was about to discover just how much strength I'd gained, and how completely my life was about to change in ways that would make everything I'd achieved so far look like just the beginning. Seattle welcomed us with typical Pacific Northwest rain, and the kind of energy that only comes from a city reinventing itself daily. My new office sat on the 32nd floor of a gleaming tower in South Lake Union, with windows that offered panoramic views of Elliott Bay and the Olympic Mountains. After years of cubicle life, having my own corner office felt like stepping into someone else's life. Building the marketing department from scratch proved to be the professional challenge I'd been craving without knowing it. Within 3 months, I'd hired a team of 12 brilliant minds from across the country, each bringing unique perspectives that made our campaign sharper and more innovative than anything I'd produced before. Emma's transition was equally smooth. Her portfolio caught the attention of several high-profile design firms, and within weeks of our arrival, she was freelancing for tech startups and established companies alike. We settled into a rhythm that felt both exciting and comfortable. 2 people building careers they genuinely loved while supporting each other's ambitions. Everything was perfect, which should have been my first warning that Jessica wasn't finished with us. The email arrived. On a Tuesday morning, 6 months after our move, the sender was listed as anonymous. But I recognized the writing style immediately. Clinical, precise, designed to inflict maximum psychological damage with surgical efficiency. "Congratulations on your new position, Ryan. I hope you're enjoying the fruits of your backstabbing." Emma looks radiant in her photos, by the way. Such a shame she doesn't know about your history of using women for professional advancement. I wonder how she'd feel knowing that you're following the exact same pattern with her that you followed with me. Attached were screenshots of my LinkedIn profile, photos from Emma's Instagram account, and what appeared to be a detailed timeline of my career progression alongside my relationships. Jessica had been watching, documenting, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. My hands shook as I deleted the email, but the damage was already done. Every insecurity I'd worked to overcome came flooding back. Was I using Emma? Had I been? Unconsciously following some pattern of manipulation that I couldn't see in myself? That evening, I found myself withdrawn and distracted. Emma noticed immediately, her artist's eye picking up on subtle changes in mood that others might miss. "What's wrong?" she asked, as we sat on our apartment balcony, watching the sun set over Puget Sound. I wanted to tell her about the email, about Jessica's latest attempt at psychological warfare, but something held me back. What if Jessica was, right? What if revealing this would only prove that I was still letting my ex-girlfriend control my life? It's work stress, I lied, hating myself for it. Emma studied my face with the same intensity she applied to her design projects. Ryan, we promised each other honesty. What's really going on? I told her. Everything. The email, the attachments, the doubts that Jessica's words had awakened. As I spoke, I watched Emma's expression shift from concern to anger to something I'd never seen before, fierce determination. She's in Seattle, Emma said quietly when I finished. She followed us here. How do you know? Emma pulled out her phone and showed me her Instagram analytics. Someone's been viewing my stories obsessively for the past 2 weeks. Always from a new account, but the timing patterns are identical. It's her. The revelation that Jessica had physically followed us to Seattle should have been terrifying. Instead, I felt a strange sense of relief. Her email hadn't been the work of someone who'd moved on and found happiness. It was the desperate action of someone still consumed by bitterness and revenge. We need to end this, I said. Once and for all. Emma nodded. I have an idea, but you're not going to like it. Her plan was elegant in its simplicity. She would post a series of Instagram stories that would lure Jessica into a public confrontation, allowing us to document her harassment and potentially get a restraining order. It was risky, but it offered the possibility of finally gaining legal protection from her stalking behavior. The next day, Emma posted a story from my office building, tagging the location and mentioning how excited she was to surprise me with lunch. If Jessica was monitoring Emma's social media as obsessively as we suspected, she'd see it as an opportunity. We waited in the lobby, Emma's phone ready to record, building security on standby. 20 minutes later, Jessica walked through the revolving doors like she belonged there. She looked different, thinner with dark circles under her eyes and an intensity that bordered on manic. Her usual polished appearance had given way to something desperate and slightly unhinged. Emma, she called out, her voice echoing across the marble lobby. We need to talk. About what, Jessica? Emma replied, her phone already recording. About the fact that you're making the same mistake I did. Ryan is using you just like he used me. He's building his career on the backs of women who think they love him. The words were Jessica's usual manipulation tactics, odd, but delivered with a raw desperation that made them sound like the ravings of someone who'd lost touch with reality. Is that what you think happened with us? I stepped into view, and Jessica's composure cracked completely. You sabotaged my career, she screamed, drawing stares from everyone in the lobby. You turned everyone against me, destroyed my reputation, ruined everything I'd worked for. You did that yourself, Jessica. I just documented it. Security was already moving toward us, alerted by the commotion. Jessica saw them coming and made one final, desperate play. He's going to hurt you, she pleaded, tears streaming down her face. I'm trying to save you from making my mistake. Please, just listen to me. Emma looked at this woman who had once been her closest friend, who had spent months orchestrating psychological warfare against the man she loved, who had followed them to another city to continue her campaign of harassment. Jessica, she said, softly, I'm not you. And Ryan isn't the person you've convinced yourself he is. You need help. Security escorted Jessica from the building while we provided statements to the police. The recording Emma had captured was more than enough evidence for a restraining order. And Jessica's cross-state stalking behavior elevated the charges to felony level. 3 weeks later, we received word that Jessica had accepted a plea deal that included mandatory counseling and a 5-year restraining order. She was moving back to the East Coast to live with family, finally removing herself from our lives permanently. That night, Emma and I sat on our balcony again, but this time the mood was entirely different. The weight that had been pressing down on us for over a year had finally lifted. Do you think she'll get better? Emma asked. I hope so, for her sake. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if she'd never come back into your life? I considered the question seriously. I think I'd still be settling for mediocrity, still believing that I needed someone else's permission to succeed. Twisted as it sounds, she forced me to discover who I really was. Emma smiled, reaching for my hand. And who are you, Ryan Mitchell? I looked out over the Seattle skyline, thinking about the journey that had brought us here. The betrayal that had felt like an ending had actually been a beginning. The woman who'd tried to destroy my confidence had inadvertently helped me find it. The relationship that was supposed to break me had led me to the person I was meant to be with. I'm someone who doesn't need anyone's approval to know my worth, I said. I'm someone who's learned the difference between love and control. And I'm someone who's grateful every day for the woman sitting next to me. Emma leaned against my shoulder as the lights of the city twinkled below us. Good answer. 6 months later, I proposed to Emma on the same balcony where we'd finally put our past to rest. She said yes before I'd even finished asking the question, and as we held each other in the fading light, I realized that Jessica had been right about one thing. I had followed a pattern in my relationships. I'd chosen women who saw my potential and believed in my dreams. The difference was that Emma celebrated my success instead of resenting it, supported my growth instead of trying to control it, and loved me for who I was rather than who she thought I could become. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's living so well that your past becomes irrelevant. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.